Hey friends, thanks for taking the time to tune in. In our last video, we looked a little bit at the history of Thessaloniki and how it came to be. We also took a few moments to observe Paul and highlight some of his strategy as seen in Acts chapter 17. For this video though, I want to continue to look at Acts chapter 17 and try to learn from Paul as we will talk about going to where the people are. So let's dive into the text that we'll be using. In Acts chapter 17, in verses 1 through 4, it reads, "When Paul and his companions had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As was his custom, Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the scriptures, explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. 'This Jesus I am proclaiming to you is the Messiah,' he said. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks and quite a few prominent women." There are 2 things from this passage that I briefly want us to highlight as we take a few moments to try and examine the example Paul had set for us. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is this phrase in verse 2 where it says, "as was his custom." As mentioned a little bit from last time, Paul would make his way into the city, find the synagogue, and then he'd begin to connect the people to Jesus. This was his custom. This was his routine. And what jumps out to me is that Paul had a plan, he had a strategy, and he was intentional with how he preached the gospel. Obviously at different points his plans adapted as the Spirit made it clear to do so, but the point that I'm getting at is Paul was intentional with his approach to faith. I think one mistake we can often make is being whimsical when it comes to our faith. We live our lives sort of aimlessly and hope God just appears along the way. I'm confident that God can intercede at any point in our lives, absolutely. But what is our plan to draw closer to Him? Something I right now that I miss dearly during all this is being able to connect with all of you in person on Sundays. I miss the singing. I miss the welcoming committee that stood outside the doors. I miss when something didn't work, we would see Lucas sprinting down the halls to go fix it. I miss these things. But when I think about the service in its entirety, I think about how each part of the service was designed to bring us closer to God. Think about the order of service. More often than not, service starts out with a song that's a little bit upbeat. And that's designed to help us get energized as our service is about to begin. After the welcome, the songs become a little bit more sobering as we like to prepare our hearts for the communion that we're about to participate in. Then the song before the sermon is designed to engage us and get us ready for the message that we are about to hear. There's obviously more details that go into the service, from the stage decoration to any sermon content. But what I want us to observe is each service is designed to bring us closer to God in that moment. It's intentional. And also, it's our custom. Let's take this another step. Think about your own walks with God. We're always encouraging people to read their Bibles every day. But even more than that, we're usually encouraging people to engage the scriptures in the mornings. Well, why? Well, our argument is to help people prepare for the day. Taking this further, we don't just encourage people to read the scriptures, but to have something specific that they're trying to study. Whether it's a book of the Bible or even a specific topic like faith or patience, we encourage people to read the Word with a sense of direction. Again, this isn't saying that the Word wouldn't have an impact otherwise, but what we're saying is it allows us to be focused and have a heart that's ready to search and hear what's before us. Even our approach to scriptures, they're intentional. And this is our custom. If so much thought is put into something as small as when to read our Bible, you have to ask yourself if you're being as intentional with your own walks with God in other areas of your lives. Spiritual habits such as these, I'd argue, can help us build healthy foundations as we start to understand God more and more in our lives. So having the mentality to be intentional will move us in a positive direction as we continue to seek God and know Him more. Going back to the passage, one custom that Paul had was he was going to places where the people were. He found himself in places where people were searching to know God more. Something I'm going to get into a little bit in my next video is Thessaloniki did have a population of Jewish people, but I'd argue that it was not their majority population. It was a town that worshiped many different gods, and in their mind, Yahweh was just one of the many. So here's where this gets interesting. The passage says that Paul is speaking in a Jewish synagogue. And then it goes on to say that some Jews were persuaded to know Christ, but a large number of Greeks, men and women, turned their lives over to Jesus. So here's a question to consider. How did the Greeks hear about Paul if Paul was speaking in a Jewish synagogue? I don't know. We don't have an answer for sure. But something I do want to draw your attention to is the fact that Paul spoke at the same location for 3 straight Sabbaths. It's my guess that Paul went to where some of the people were, and his impact led to more people showing up. I think we need to find ways to be where the people are. Absolutely. In fact, this is probably going to be different now more than it's ever been before. But what kind of impact are you having when you get to those places? Next time we'll take a historical look again at the structure of the city and to see the culture that Paul and the other disciples were up against when preaching the gospel. But for now, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to tune in, and we'll see you here back next week.